Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Welcome to another episode of the Success in Africa Leadership Podcast. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce. This is the second of 3 episodes we're going to do with Dr. Sangu Delle, an investor, an author, an entrepreneur. He is the founder of He's in the venture capital business. He's in the healthcare business. He's been a TEDx fellow. He's been recognized globally as one of the movers and shakers of the world. He's got degrees from Oxford, Birmingham, and Harvard. And today we're excited to be learning from him. So if you missed the first episode, I encourage you to listen to that one because we're going to jump right into it with Dr. Sangu Delle. Sangu, I want to jump now into how you got into entrepreneurship. You know, as an African, a typical African will be like, somebody as smart as you and studious, you should be in the University of Ghana, tenured professor. How did you start becoming an entrepreneur and an investor?
Well, first of all, it's great to be back here, and it's always wonderful to see you, my dear brother. So let me start with what an uncle of mine told me when he found out, and he was very upset that I was not going to study medicine. He said there are only 4 paths for an African child. You become a doctor, you become a lawyer, you become an engineer, or you become a fool. So and so, so when he had, and then to make it worse, I had the audacity to go and study African studies in addition. And so it was like, you left Africa to go to Harvard, to go and study Africa. What is wrong with you? But in the last episode, one of the things you and I spoke about, well, you asked me a question about book long, right? And what's the impact of that practically in your real life? I think my entrepreneurship journey is textbook case study on how those two merge. Mm-hmm. My journey into entrepreneurship started from my intellectual curiosity. And so I first was really trying to understand why Africa is what it is. Where did we come from? Where are we vis-a-vis the rest of the world? And what does the outlook look like for us? And so I, when I was in high school, for example, I worked on a research project where I traveled around West Africa. And the research project was trying to understand why is it that democracy has had a very different experience in the Anglophone countries versus the Francophone countries. And one of my hypotheses was it had something to do with the colonial experience, especially how it related to the indigenous socio-political institutions, our chieftaincy systems. And those, so that's kind of how I was approaching a lot of these things. I looked at global economic historical data from the year 1000 to 2000, and I was looking at mega trends, meta trends across time, space, geography. So, and I realized that whether you're talking about Russia, Brazil, Europe, US, whether it's 1100s, 1842, 1963, you saw that across the board, similar things happened everywhere when certain conditions were met. When urbanization rates reached a certain level, similar things happened. When per capita income reached a certain level, consumer preferences changed. And so even though there were nuances here and there were certain broad trends that you saw happen all over the world across time. And so my thesis was very simple. Why should Africa be any different? So I believed that a lot of those trends, we should see similar trends happen on the continent, albeit at different speeds for the various countries. On the basis of that, I then decided to set up Golden Palm Investments in 2006. Next year will be 20 years to invest behind that thesis. Now, Golden Palm was not my first entrepreneurial venture. It was my first serious entrepreneurial venture, but I had flirted with entrepreneurial ventures without even knowing what the term entrepreneur really was. I remember my earliest memory of doing something entrepreneurial was when they were constructing the road. So this was in the 90s. They were constructing the road at East Legon, and there was nowhere to buy water, food. There was none of that because there was no road there. They were now building the road. So my brothers and I literally would we'll put water, we basically tie water up, put it in the fridge and sell it to the construction workers. It was, we were very excited. And one day my mother found some of the coins in my pocket and thought I had stolen the money. Where did this money come from? And I said, no, I didn't steal it from anybody. And I told her what we were doing, and she was furious. She said, how can you charge water for the people who are building our road? So she put an end to it. And, my takeaway from that experience was, when you make money, hide it from mommy. So my next entrepreneurial venture, when I was in class 5 and class 6, I was top of my class, so I would tutor some of the kids. And my mother was a health nut. My mother would give me the healthiest lunch, the most boring lunch, with fat-free, the bread is multi-grain. Imagine you're in class 5, your friends are having these nice, juicy sandwiches, corned beef with mayonnaise, and you're over here with multi-grain, lettuce, and some, So I realized that if these people give me money, my mother will find the money. I'll now be in trouble. Why are you charging people? So I said, look, instead of that, they should pay me with food. I'm telling you. My biggest client was Niamankwa Ado. We are still friends to this day. Niamankwa Ado. Yeah, so that's how the journey started. And Golden Palm, we started as entrepreneurs, incubating businesses, developing it from that broad thesis. For example, we looked at projections and saw that Africa's population was going to increase exponentially. We saw from the data, average birth per woman at that time, 5.9. Well, if there are going to be 1 billion plus babies born in Africa, what does it mean? There's going to be huge demand for baby food. So we actually went and got a manufacturing business in Kenya to make baby food. Or another thesis we had was globalization was going to change the dynamics of trading, where before trading was mostly dominated by multinational firms. But now with technology, our thesis was you're going to start to see some democratization of that, where now the small merchant in Freetown or in Nairobi or in Accra or Tamale can now communicate directly with counterparts in China and trade. So before, all those multinationals were using the big banks. But with a lot of these petty traders, they use cash. So what does that mean? It means there's going to be more demand for them to have FX. And so we went and got licenses from the central bank and created a chain of about 8 forex bureau de change. That is, and that's mostly focused on the merchants, the traders, right, and helping support some of that cross-border trading activity. So those were the sorts of things we were doing. So we did things in financial services, agribusiness, real estate, we're in agroforestry, aquaculture, farming, healthcare, and then had a big thesis on technology. But technology was where we realized that it's a very different sector. So in all the other sectors, I didn't need to have deep experience. I could hire the people with the experience, and I could use our general business acumen and knowledge to run the businesses, and we run it quite successfully.
Mm-hmm.
But with technology, if you can't speak code or understand it, how can you? I mean, you are lost. So in trying to do that, we realized that we simply do not have the technical background for this. So that's how we became accidental venture capitalists. Because we said, we don't understand this. Let's find people who understand it. And finding these people, they are doing interesting things. We said, okay, why don't we give them money, take a stake of their business. We know business very well. We're doing stuff across Africa, and we'll help them scale. And over time, we were very fortunate to have invested in some of the most successful startups. We're the first investors in Flutterwave, Delle, M-Pharma, Wasoko, a number of these great startups. And they did extremely well. And over time, the tech portfolio became the biggest part of the business. And we ended up, divesting, selling off all the portfolio except for the VC, the tech, and then healthcare, which later became CarePoint. So that's the journey from being a nerd to being an entrepreneur.
So let me ask the question that I'm sure everybody listening to this wants to know. Where did you find the money to start?
Yes. So, when we first started Golden Palm, I remember our initial incorporation was $100. And how I was able to raise the capital was also accidental. I was talking a lot about this thesis and the research and all of that. At that time, this was my first year at Harvard. And I had a roommate who actually shared a bunk bed, Jamie Stern, who is now a very successful hedge fund manager. He runs a massive multi-billion-dollar fund. But Jamie, I think, was about third generation Harvard. Both his parents went there, and his siblings. I mean, his family, multiple generations had gone to Harvard. Both his parents were very successful people in finance. His mother was a top money manager. His father was a top private equity investor. And so, I mean, when Jamie was 5 years old or so, his birthday gift, whilst I got probably Fanta and a cake, he got Microsoft stock, right? So
This one is not level.
I'm telling you. And Jamie was, I remember we would be in economics class and I'm taking notes and listening to the lecturer, and he's trading on his computer. So I learned so much from him. And I remember he was the one who really told me that, talking about all of this, why don't you just go and do it? And I said, like, how? Right? And he said, well, go out and raise capital. I said, capital from who? I'm going to go to who in Ghana and tell them that, please, I have this idea, give me money. It's not going to work. And so he was the one who taught me how to put together a pitch deck. And he was the one who actually wrote a check of $5,000 and helped connect me to others. And so I ended up raising $50,000 from the Harvard ecosystem. And that was our first capitalization. And so I say this because, I think that too often we glorify the story, and everybody wants to have this rags to riches story. right? That is not my case. And I always try to demystify that. I always try to say I benefited from a lot of embedded privilege, right? If I was at a polytechnic university in Sierra Leone or in Ghana, I would not have had access to that same sort of network who would even be able to teach me those things or to be able to say I'll write a check or to connect me. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. I also benefited from the mere fact that my father was educated, right? So the fact that I had access to books, I had access to a good education, these were things that most certainly benefited me. So even though I didn't have the sort of wealth, right, where you can say, okay, my family can fund this for me, I wasn't poor, right? My father, yes, I mean, as you know, in Africa, doctors are not, they're like, you're not like super wealthy, but you're doing well, right? You're doing well enough. So I grew up with some relative privilege, though, I always joke that in growing up in Ghana, your status feels okay, middle class or upper middle class, and then you went to the US and suddenly everything changed.
You discovered that you were not quite middle class.
So in Ghana, I was in the privileged class, and then I got to the US and I was a financial aid student who was working 3 jobs on campus. But I've been a beneficiary of incredible privilege and blessings, and that's something that I don't shy away from, and I openly point out to, because I think there's a bit too much window dressing. You hear people's stories and everybody wants to talk about how they were in the slums starting with selling gari, and and then they made, and it's just like, and the problem I have with a lot of those narratives is you are selling false dreams to people.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to follow up, which is implied, but I'd love for you to spell it out. Having raised the first $50,000, what happened then? Did you chop it and buy a new Honda Accord?
No. So it's something that I've always tried to advise my mentees and younger people, is to tell them that even if you want to be greedy, be long-term greedy. Don't be short-term. We're too short-term in our thinking. So if I had done anything untoward with 50,000, you've destroyed the opportunities in the future. But and for me, what was very important, and what is extremely important in raising capital and doing business, your greatest currency is your reputation. It's more important than your experience, your track record. It's more important than anything else, is your reputation. And so I understood very early on that this is going to be the most important and most valuable asset I have, and I would guard it with all my life. And so integrity, transparency, those things, it's the equivalent of money. It's an asset, because it literally allows you to convert it into money. Right? I remember one investor several years ago, John, who I went, had a conversation, pitched what we were doing to him. And he's a very sophisticated investor. I mean, this is someone who manages a lot of money. And the speed with which he agreed to invest, I was a bit taken aback. So I actually queried him on it, because I said, you are a very sophisticated investor, so why are you so quickly jumping in here? And he laughed and he said, I already checked you out. I made some calls in the Harvard ecosystem. So to him, that validation mattered more than the plenty presentation that I was doing. So I don't say this to say that people should not do their work and you shouldn't have your prepping. No, no, no. But I say it to say that that is not sufficient. In fact, what is more important is to make sure that you have a stellar reputation where when due diligence is done, it will encourage people to invest in you.
Wow, wow, wow. So let me just share what I'm getting. Folks, I hope we're learning some serious knowledge here about how to be successful. You see, what I'm getting from you, Sangu, is that number one, your area of study and your knowledge is what led you into doing business in those areas, investing, because your research informed where you put the money. And then where you put the money, where you got the money from, started from people that you knew and knew you. Based on how you had behaved, that's why Jamie had the confidence to put $5,000 into you and to even invest his time into training you on how to do a pitch deck. Then, based on leveraging Jamie's reputation, that then raised the 50,000. And then, based on the 50,000 and how you used it with integrity, with transparency, that then raised further money to the point that smart, very sophisticated investors would be able to go with you based on just your reputation and, of course, a good, solid pitch deck. This is so much to learn. And my favorite quote from what you've shared with us today is that your greatest currency is your reputation. And my second favorite is, even if you want to be greedy, be long-term greedy. So, folks, I hope you are learning. As we're going to the third episode with Dr. Sangu Delle, we're going to turn the spotlight towards a few more, slightly more personal matters. Because being successful in Africa perhaps may be more than just making money. Join us in the third episode.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.